How's it going, everyone? Welcome to this solo live stream. I don't do these very often, but I thought it might make a little bit of a difference, a bit of change of pace to talk to you guys just about the main topic of this channel, which is Russia-Ukraine, obviously, and NATO. Two major developments today that are sort of unlinked, but have into association because they both cover the same area of the world, and well, it's all integrated at the end of the day. Coming to you from Malawi in Africa, came out here for some birthday celebrations, and well, the world keeps turning, as I said in my previous stream with Trittipasi on Iran, and I wanted to take the opportunity to just sort of try to do some of these live streams. So yeah, settle in, probably chat for maybe half an hour, 40 minutes. If you've got questions, drop them in the comments, and yeah, let me know what you guys think of the situation. But yeah, I thought the two main headlines that I wanted to touch on were simply Russia has deployed nuclear munitions to Belarus as part of its largest nuclear drills in years, mind you, and simultaneously Trump's chaotic announcement of about 5,000 troops being shifted to Poland after cancelling 4,000 the week before. So this is the same, 24 hours and completely two different opposite directions. Neither are coordinated, as I said, but they're both enormous, you could arguably say, for many reasons. Some of you have seen the interview I had with Wesley Clark, former NATO commander, of a couple of weeks ago. So if you haven't seen that, I recommend you watch it. There's no one better place to talk about the complexities of NATO right now and what it's facing with Trump or not than him. You might not like everything he has to say. He said some things which I think a lot of us would disagree with, but or see differently. But I'm kind of curious, what story of these two, the Russia's nuclear deployments or Trump's NATO chaos, which worries you more, or which do you think is more of a story? Let me know in the comments. But yeah, I think it's I think that the overarching question that sort of came to mind when I was reading these pieces was simply sort of, are we watching a security architecture that is adapting, or that's sort of quietly imploding in some ways? Because Rutte's sort of reassurance to other allies within the NATO alliance was not the best. To be honest with you, I have reservations about Mark Rutte. I don't think he's a bad politician, but I don't know if he's the best person to manage NATO. I don't really like the way that he's sucked up to Trump in many ways in the past 2 years or whatever, in the time that it was clear Trump was going to be running again and Rutte took over. Just the whole daddy comment is just really weird. So anyway, that's, yeah, let me know what you guys think. But to me, it's, well, let's get into a bit more. So basically what's happened, so Russia has launched these nuclear capable missiles and has essentially issued nuclear munitions to some units which were part of some major exercises framed around preparing forces for the, quote, what they called the use of nuclear forces in event of aggression. What's interesting about these exercises, though, is that they were completely unannounced. There wasn't, as far as I was aware or anywhere else that I'd been following, sort of scheduled nuclear drills for May. It's usual strategic nuclear exercises, or what's known as GROM, they're usually held in October, or at least since the full-scale invasion. They've held these nuclear exercises, these nuclear movements, shows of force, etc., in the autumn, not in the spring. So this is quite interesting. And there was one of the senior military staff from Moscow's security architecture that said he thinks that the West, or NATO, or Europe specifically, and Russia are never been more than closer to war than they have been right now. So just a lovely sort of reiteration of a narrative and escalation and warmongering and etc. I mean, they've said that for ages. I mean, 6 months ago, I think it was a British diplomat or a British politician that said that, we are effectively at war with Russia. So it just doesn't seem to stop with both sides sort of saying that we're at war, we're approaching war, we're in nuclear Armageddon, which kind of makes me feel it loses its value. I'm not saying that Russia doesn't pose or Putin doesn't pose a security concern for Europe, but I think sometimes constantly claiming that we're in an imminent phase of war, all out carnage, kind of reduces the intensity when we genuinely are on that precipice. Now, what's worth noting about these nuclear exercises is how much Belarus was involved. Belarus has sort of gone under the radar in the past year, 2 years. They haven't really been as mentioned in the media, especially I think it was late 23, early 24, when there was discussion over whether Belarus was just going to get involved or they were just going to completely open their borders to the Russians to use as sort of a training ground. So, yeah, I don't really know why suddenly they've decided, but it's also worth noting that these exercises followed the successful launch of the Sarmat, the ICBM test launch. That was on 12th of May. And that was after quite a lot of failures, from what I remember. Some of you cast your minds back. There was a silo destroying misfire in September 24. So it's sort of the Russians are very keen to demonstrate that they've made this progress with this hardware and get it working. And we had a good conversation with Paul Wahlberg. Some of you guys know me from him, or others know each other. And I asked him about that. You can find a clip, I think, on the channel, of me asking him specifically about the Sarmat. So that was it. The Deputy Foreign Minister, Rybakov, was the one who said that the strategic risks are mounting, is what he said. A head-on clash between NATO and our country, with all the potential catastrophic consequences that would entail. That's exactly what he said. But what Peskov said, the spokesperson said, is arguably more revealing. He was asked during a press conference, I think, whether these exercises were a signal to Europe and NATO, and he basically said that any exercises are part of military development, and any exercises are a signal. So that's not really a denial. It's more just sort of admission just as a non-answer, sort of a confirm nor deny kind of thing. As I said about Belarus as well, what's interesting is that the Sarmat is also, as I asked Paul, like sort of the Oreshnik was everything that was the attention, everyone freaking out about the capabilities of this intermediate range ballistic missile. Suddenly that's been forgotten about, and the Sarmat is the new thing on the block. And Belarus seems to be quite keen to sort of host these. Maybe it acts as a sufficient deterrent, I don't know. But they fear sort of Ukraine is going to invade Belarus. Not entirely sure why Lukashenko is so keen to host all these missiles, but they've been happy to do that as well. And of course, as I made a couple videos on this in the past few days, this all coincides with Putin's return from China, where he came back with nothing. He went there to try to secure the Power of Siberia 2 pipeline, and Xi Jinping basically just whisked him on his way, which was quite satisfying, to be honest. Not that I really expected that to happen, but Putin, what I think is interesting is that the circumstances around Trump and Putin was very similar in the way that Xi received both of them. But whilst a lot of agreements were signed with the Russians, they still didn't commit to Siberia 2. So even though Xi is making all these pleasantries about sort of the lifelong friendship or alliance that will never die, etc., he's not willing to sign something that would be one of the most critical benefits for the Russians. So that's just worth I think considering. Now, There was one assessment that I saw by, I don't know if some of you guys will know the Institute of the Study of War, and they have a subdivision called Critical Threats, which assesses a lot of the military capabilities and obviously the threat perception associated with military, geopolitical, economic, etc. And they did an assessment of these exercises, and they were trying to sort of their claim was that they were trying to influence NATO's decision making by just masking Moscow's even greater weaknesses. So typical classical bravado, show as much military might as you can as a way to demonstrate that, look, NATO's got some internal issues, but we have a very functioning and united military capacity. So do not even remotely think that you can go to war with us sort of mindset. I saw an interesting post by another friend of the channel, Preston Stewart, who was saying that the Russians, after 2.5 years of taking Bakhmut, they have progressed a whole in its entirety of 14 kilometers westwards. That's it, 14 kilometers. And therefore it's this idea. Everyone always actually, on a side note, everybody always puts an emphasis on the idea of a spring offensive coming through, the spring offensives of the Russians, the spring offensives of the Ukrainians. I think that kind of framing needs to be quashed a bit, because firstly, it doesn't work. We haven't seen a successful spring offensive really at all. And secondly, why would you telegraph that you're going to be launching some massive combat operation at this specific timing, as we saw with the Ukrainians in their remarkable acquisition of territory in late 2022? You don't announce those sorts of things. So I just think that's rather ridiculous. But again, it just, bottom line for me, I think you can summarize these military drills and the bravado, the hot air coming from Moscow through Belarus as just an attempt to distract further and further from the economy. The economy is absolutely shocking. More information I read, more information I hear. Konstantin Somalyov, another friend of the channel, has, he updates me with things occasionally, and it just boggles my mind more and more consistently how much the Russian economy just is in a certain situation. It's just appalling. So yeah, just can't really get my head around that ever, to be honest with you. But aside from that, the other thing that I wanted to touch on was, of course, this troop deployment announcement. So this is really weird, or perhaps it isn't, because it's regarding Donald Trump and his U-turns, the tacos, the idiocy. But essentially, the Pentagon there was this idea of canceling 4,000 troops bound for Poland. And now Trump has announced, as of today or whatever, the past 24 hours, that 5,000 troops are going to Poland. And this is all, I think most people would agree, this is, I think, Trump's personal preference for the leader of Poland, not Donald Tusk, the president, Nawrocki. I know that's not the best pronunciation, but given that he's a bit more nationalist and right of center, Trump likes him, obviously. What's also unclear, from my understanding, is that it's whether these troops are going to be redeployed from Germany or whether they're just going to be new forces. There's obviously been a lot of alarmism around Trump wanting to reduce forces in Germany and punish the states that have been most critical of him or his war with Iran. But even despite all the threats, nothing's actually followed through, unsurprisingly. But it's yet to be clear whether he is going to pull troops from Germany and sort of give them to Poland, but I think in a broader point, it shows more and more just how Poland is becoming a serious regional player in Europe. You've got Germany, obviously, for the economic power in most ways, but it's not that clear cut. France, supposedly, for nuclear power, and just generally, the Franco-German workhorse relationship of the European Union, etc. Britain is supposed to be there, albeit I think Britain's in pretty terrible shape right now. Actually, we've got a video on that coming out tomorrow, sort of the relationship of Britain to foreign policy, a really good one. Recommend you keep a lookout for that. But yeah, I think Poland's really coming through there. The economy has exploded in recent years. The expenditure on obviously defense is incredibly important, and they are just more and more just showing a willingness to lead or to say the uncomfortable truths, to say the things that a lot of people are thinking, especially Eastern European countries and communities, and take up the mantle, so to speak. So it's I think it's I think that's worth noting. So apart from the Nor-Rocky relationship, which is not just transactional politics, it's also because Trump endorsed him. If you remember, when he was running again to be president, Trump gave him a lot of emphasis. So, when Trump, that's right. I'm trying to cast my mind back to Trump's sort of how many times he's written in favor, because he writes crap all the time. But the other thing, and I think is more structurally significant, is Poland has been, as I say, the biggest defender, and Trump has been wanting to get countries to pay more. And so I think this is just a case of Trump realizing that he can't punish other countries like kicking them out. Therefore, he's just going to try to relatively reward others, which is it's not going to have the intended effect, I think. What I find interesting is that when I was reading into this a bit further beyond the headlines, it came out to me that Nor-Rockies actually oppose Ukrainian NATO membership and Polish troop deployments in Ukraine. So for Trump to be sending more American troops is a bit of a weird one. And then, of course, there's Rutte, or Mark Rutte. He was at the foreign ministry meeting, and he said that basically, I think the statement or the line that stood out for me was simply that the alliance is moving towards a quote less reliant on being less reliant on one ally. That's essentially conceding that the alliance cannot count on America, but we're still not in this situation where we can fully move on from it. I think it was less than a month ago, less than 2 weeks ago, that Rutte was trying to say to the broader world, even, that the US isn't going to leave NATO. It's perfectly fine, and Europe needs to get its act together, but ultimately the transatlantic relationship will hold. But less than 2 weeks on, he's now sort of changed his framing a little bit, and that Europe really needs to be independent, which is kind of nuts. At the same time, we've had plenty of other people emphasizing that we need to find something outside of NATO, completely different kind of organization. And so he's trying to emphasize, no, it's about NATO. We NATO is the answer. I'm also hearing some very weird noises coming from. So I'm sitting in like an open room bar, and I don't know, I can hear like a screeching noise. So there's also bugs flying around, so you can probably see they're all attracted to my light. But I can do it in the dark, and that might not be a very enjoyable stream. But anyway, as I said, the world doesn't stop moving, and events don't stop happening. So we still need to do a stream occasionally. Now, the thing I wanted to do is sort of bring in the two headlines together, because to be honest, like, these two stories aren't really separate, even though they're being treated as such. You could argue that they're effectively a call and response, and Moscow especially, I think, is listening to both. To understand how the Russians look at nuclear weaponry, you have to understand that their signaling strategy, half of obviously nuclear warfare or nuclear stuff is signaling, is telegraphing, and their approach has always been about political cohesion, not military capability. The Russians like having 15,000 nuclear warheads because it sounds really good and forces them to be considered a big power. But as some people have debated on this channel, and we've had, well, I think it was me and James Colinzi or Michael Rossi or other people, simply having a massive nuclear arsenal doesn't necessarily determine you to be a very powerful nation. Because strip that away, and what else do you have? It looks good optically, which is why the Chinese are proliferating their arms, because they want to be seen as a major power, and sort of status is speak. And so to only have 500 warheads when the Russians have 5,000, 15,000 or whatever, or did, that basically the Chinese need to proliferate more nuclear warheads just to say that they have as many as the Americans and the Russians, and therefore on the same playing field. But in this case, as I say, the Russians, it's not necessarily only about that military capability, it's more about the political cohesion. It's not to make NATO think that Russia will actually launch. The goals, as I think we've largely come to expect, make NATO hesitate, to increase that fragmentation, and to make the cost of almost any decision feel too high. That's why we've seen the amount of incursions continuously, because so many nations, especially in Western Europe, I think, do not want to be the one to say, okay, the Russians have launched a jet which has violated Baltic airspace. Well, let's just shoot it down. But that's largely what should be done. I made this in another video several weeks ago now, but Turkey did this a few years ago. When the Russians put a jet into Turkish airspace, they just shot it down. We just shot it down, and the Russians were outraged, and the relationship between the Turks and the Russians was never fully healed. It's never been the same again. But they didn't do anything. If anything, I think they sent a strongly worded condemnation to the UN, which is kind of ironic considering how much they criticize it for being a Western or US imperialistic space. So the Russians, or the Kremlin, knows that it can get away with more provocation by just pushing the boundaries, testing the waters, and ultimately NATO's not going to do anything, partially because of the fragmentation, but also partially for fear of repercussions, which is not it's not really deterrence then, is it? It's quite pathetic. What if you think about it from the Russian perspective, what have they actually seen on top of everything else that Trump's doing with Iran, etc., China? They saw the Pentagon cancel a deployment to Poland, watch various people, especially Republican, call it an embarrassment, and then see Trump reverse it, of course, via social media. So that's not really how you go about deterring. That's called improvisation and complete moronicness, if that's a word, like idiocy. So the Russians don't look at what's happening, and that's mainly the American front, but it does, of course, affect how the allies within NATO, how Europe feels like, what the hell are we supposed to do with this? And that's why Rutte said what he said. So essentially steelman the other side, right? Now, one piece I saw earlier, which was quite interesting, and I can put it in the chat if people are interested, but there was an argument that Trump's unpredictability is therefore the deterrent. A rational, predictable adversary is easier to game theory than an erratic one. If Moscow can't model or map out Washington, or specifically Trump's behavior, then that uncertainty basically will make them restrained. But I don't think that's, one, logical, two, accurate, or three, the way that the Russians would build a strategy of this level. Deterrence requires credibility, for one, and credibility requires consistency. So you can't deter sort of, I don't even know how to put it, like vibes. Trump's deterrence strategy is vibes. You can't build an effective counter strategy by just being like, oh, he's tweeted this today. What about tomorrow? So yeah, that's not deterrence theory. And escalation ladder and all these sorts of things are some of the areas of international relations or strategic studies, which I did specifically. I find it really fascinating because there's such a human psychology element. I've always been really interested in psychology. So yeah, there's a good book as well. I read about that once, about deterrence theory, not just in a geopolitical context, but like in corporate environments, conflict. It's all about that. So it's basically the moment and your opponent, your adversary decides to test this sort of ambiguous commitment, you either have to back it up or you don't. And if you don't, then any remaining level of deterrence that you had is gone. It just collapses. So to bring this back round to sort of the Polish NATO Trump element, and in the context of Russia, like Poland is visibly one of the biggest barriers for Putin. If there were to be some kind of campaign, which I remain very skeptical about anyway, Poland's not going to be the place you want to start. You know, it has the troops, it has the relationship, it has the spending credentials. The Baltics, on the other hand, don't have any of that. And we continue to see these more games mapped out of Putin, you know, talking about invading or doing something. I think there was one UAV incident in Baltic airspace earlier in the month. And generally, they just seem to be at the forefront of Russia's provocations, more than sort of around even Moldova or Transnistria or the Black Sea more generally. So I don't know, if you're Estonia or Latvia right now, how do you feel about Article 5 and Trump's commitments to sort of it becomes Poland's responsibility as the regional power to protect its surrounding states, which I guess they have said to an extent, but it's still a big commitment to do. And it remains to be seen whether Poland has that capacity. The last thing I just sort of wanted to do really in this was simply look at where this could go, because obviously a lot is happening right now with Iran. The war in Ukraine has, I think, it's been a lot of exchanges of strikes. And there was one piece that I noted about just how fearful a lot of Russian senior personnel feel about Ukraine's broader growing potential capacity to strike even further into Russia. Or not even about distance, just more and more about precision. The one thing that Ukraine has been developing more intensely that I understand is precision attacks, not just, you know, depth into the Russian state, but how well that they can take out a very minute target within a heavily urbanized area, for example. But yeah, basically we've got two things happening simultaneously. Russia is performing this nuclear strength from a position of what is operational weakness. It's made, as I said, 14 kilometers since Bakhmut 3 years ago. One thing Konstantin did tell me, and I've had other friends tell me, is recruitment is absolutely terrible right now. The Russians the government is struggling insanely to incentivize people to sign up to fight, even with these massive bonuses or financial incentives. And all the while, it needs to sort of try to reinforce to the Europeans, especially, that escalation is really risky. At least from the Russian perspective, they need to constantly emphasize that the West is escalating, and therefore it's the duty of Russia to be at war, to be conducting the SMO and be protecting against the NATO encroachment, etc. So that's an incredibly dangerous combination, because a weakened actor with nuclear leverage and incentives to use it, that's not the best situation you want. And I think what's even more interesting is simply that Putin he's in China. He makes these occasional visits. He makes these, what I'm noting about him now, more than even in recent months, is he only appears at big public engagements. He's only ever at the International Economic Forum in St. Petersburg. He goes to China. He's at Victory Day Parade. Everything else, you don't really see him. You don't see him wandering around. I think there's been some predetermined shots or like pre-prepared shots of him in a factory somewhere or meeting some, babushkas or something. But essentially, he doesn't make many public appearances right now. Making people wonder, of course, where is he? Is something going wrong? But I think the paranoia isolation, there was a really interesting piece in the Financial Times about a month ago, I think 3 weeks ago, discussing just how much Putin's inner circle, not just his inner circle in terms of the elites or the people who support him or his, Shoigu or his friends like that, more simply his inner circle of his literal security network, his security apparatus, the people around him, even smaller. Putin's effectively making mini purges within his own security detail. and really reclusive. What's the word? He's sort of, really internalizing and becoming less and less engaged with people that he might have even remotely before engaged with, is what I'm saying. So I think that this is a demonstration of everything that we're seeing in Russia's foreign policy and its military actions, in the rhetoric that it's stating. It's I see less of him and just much more of the mouthpieces doing the commentary, really managing the sort of the house, so to speak, like Peskov or the others. I forget their names, to be honest. Now, I wanted to also, so the two things that are happening. So on the one hand, you've got Russia with the performing nuclear strength, but from operational weakness. On the same hand, you've got NATO that is what seems to be transitioning from this, what is supposed to be the collective mutual alliance, to sort of what some people have called a bilateral transaction model. And essentially sort of what that means is that on the one hand, you've got the rest of NATO and America, or just Trump and NATO and Rutte or whoever, trying to sort of manage that deteriorating relationship. What's worse is that you used to have people like Meloni, or maybe Macron, a couple others, helping to try to massage that. But given Trump's comments over the Pope or anything, whatever Trump said, he's burnt the bridges to the point where even Meloni was like, no, that's not okay. So it's very much just NATO and Trump, or NATO versus America. And as we've said before many times on the channel, I'm sure some of you have commented even now, Ukraine is sort of more of the main ally to NATO, but isn't in NATO, versus the US. So the uncomfortable conclusion is basically Europe is being pushed towards this strategic autonomy, which I think it absolutely should damn well be pursuing, but not because it wants it or wants it yet or is ready for it, but because it can't not afford to have it anymore. And that the problem with that is it's not the intention or the in principle, it's that it's going to take time, a decade, maybe a bit less. Right? We're making efforts to see rearmament and independence or decoupling of certain American industries or tech, or diversifying to China or India for economic opportunities, etc. But meanwhile, the window of potential maximal vulnerability or escalation with Moscow is still there, right? We don't know what Trump's going to do in the next few months. If the midterms are a complete dumpster fire for him, which looks like, he will become a lame duck president. He could lose the House and possibly the Senate. Someone told me earlier they think that is literally that possible. That doesn't give Europe much cushion. They don't have the luxury of time, basically, to take their time to decide what they want to do. And even if we are in the best case scenario of getting things refined, improved, taking all the necessary steps and policy shifts, that's still going to be ages. It's still going to take years. And the fact that we've got sort of the British, what did the British government do yesterday? They quietly, I can't remember if they cancelled it completely or just diluted it, sanctions on Russian energy, effectively. Basically, they have made it easier or less punishable for Russian energy because of the cost of living crisis and situation like that. So they've diluted sanctions as fuel prices rise. So they've diluted oil sanctions against the Russians' sources. Yeah, this was 2 days ago they did this. They made plans to impose a ban on UK imports of diesel and jet fuel made from Russian oil in third countries have been watered down. So they haven't done it directly from Russia, but they have diluted down plans to cut off even more areas that could have alleviated the Putin's economic conditions. So that's not great. And it's this inconsistency, which is part of the problem, I think, worries about NATO or European ability to go it alone, so to speak. So, a lot happening. NATO is essentially run on bilateral deals. Every other week, there's a sort of, well, if you give me that, I'll allow you to do this. Russia just casually threatening nukes or intensifying its use of nukes if it's losing or when it's losing on the battlefield. And Europe struggling to figure out what it should be doing, as usual. Strategic capacity, where it should have been probably quite a few years before, but negligence and preference for welfare and markets like that, welfare instead of defense is not great. But yeah, that's largely it, guys. That's 35 minutes. That's a good, I think we've got a good I think we've had a good chat. Any of you, if you had any questions, I'm just checking through here. I disagree that drones are all that matter. I've seen people make this comment, and sure, in many ways, my hair is very. I need to. I'm looking through the comments. Some of you guys, you went online with that hair. I mean, you know, it's. What do you want from me? It's 10:36 on a Friday night in Africa. What do you want? You're lucky I'm doing a stream at all, or that I have the internet connection to do that, right? So anyway, as I was saying, basically, look, drones are the definitive factor in modern warfare, but I don't think that they fully replace manpower, and I don't think what's happening in Ukraine, it can be made applicable everywhere else. A lot of wars aren't fought necessarily directly. They can be fought quite independently or like indirectly. And drones, I don't know. I'm not a military analyst, I'll be honest, and I don't feel confident enough to say that I know that I can't predict the future or whatever of direction of drones. Simply, all that they are doing is wreaking havoc in Ukraine, increasingly wreaking havoc across Russia, and there seems very little to be able to intercept them, apart from, of course, if you are Ukraine and your capacity to intercept. So yeah, that's what I'd say. I don't think Putin was double. He is. I've never believed this idea that Putin has a sort of a body double or a triple or whatever. It's yeah, I think it was Putin, to be honest, and I don't see why that would happen. Looking through some of your other comments, yeah, that's the drones in Eastern Europe and the Baltics. That was part of the problem. That was that's what I touched on in some of my other points earlier. We'll just have to see where this goes. I personally, I think that this is just going to continue round and round. Trump likes to give his attention to other things. 1 minute it's about Iran, and he's just commenting about how useless NATO is. He hates all of them because they haven't done the right thing of getting involved with his war on choice, and therefore he's going to try to punish them. But he's learning very quickly that that's not how it works. And ultimately, I mean, NATO will be fine. I think that NATO minus is a feasible concept, but also I just think that NATO is too big to fail in some ways. Can it be severely undermined and depleted? Sort of a husk? Yes, but does that mean it's not going to work at all? No, I think it can still exist. And I think it's important for it to be molded more. I said this in a video I recorded about a month ago, that if anything, it could potentially give NATO greater clarity. With a lesser involved United States, it means that then Europeans are the ones primarily determining where NATO focuses. And that means on Europe instead of getting lost in conflicts in the Middle East in the past 25 years. So you can focus on issues such as your southern border and migration flows or threats of terrorism. You can focus on your eastern flank with Putin, but also you can focus on your northern flank with the Arctic and the situation there, where, of course, the Chinese, the Russians, the Americans, of obviously Greenland. This allows NATO, without the United States, to be a lot more clarified, have greater strategic clarity is the term, I think. But yeah, that's what I'd say to that. All right, guys, I'm gonna give it a land there. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you guys think of, well, all these stories today. I thought they were worth noting in a live stream. I might post a video with some of my thoughts in a separate one tomorrow, but otherwise, yeah, thanks for your support and birthday wishes. It was kind of you, all of you support. And yeah, of course, do give the video a like, do subscribe if you're new. I mean, I usually do better streams than this, but I thought I'd just jump on relatively casually and have a sort of quick chat with you guys and hear some of your thoughts and share some of mine. But otherwise, speak to you soon. Have a good one. Take care. Right.